Today's message is entitled, Behold, You're Beautiful. Behold, You're Beautiful. And that is a quote from the Song of Songs, which we will get to at the end. I'm going to be teaching in depth on the Song of Songs in Bible school this semester, holyfireschool.com, You can register, and it's going from the 4th of August to the 1st of December. So I'm going to pray. We're going to be reading. Let me first read Exodus 3, 4 through 6, and then we'll pray. Exodus 3, 4 through 6. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, and this is talking about Moses here. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Here I am, which is this Hebrew word, hineni, that we're learning about. Hineni. Here I am. But do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So, Father, I'm asking that you take this word and you would breathe on us. Breathe on it, just like the wind is blowing and turning the pages. Lord, let the wind of your Spirit blow on your word and make it alive to us. And teach us your ways and let us hear your voice and become closer with you through this message in Jesus' name. And just hands on our hearts and pray this with me. Dear Jesus, with some conviction, dear Jesus, speak to my heart and change my life. Amen. So the last verse we read was, at this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Usually when I read that verse, I focus, or when I read this passage, I focus on the first part of Exodus 3:6, which is God says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And when I get to the part, at this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God, I read it quickly, not thinking too much of it, just that God is great, and Moses was afraid to look at him. In the beginning of the verse, we see that Yahweh had this close, intimate relationship with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And because of that relationship, which is foundational to Moses' call, because of that relationship, Yahweh beckons Moses to carry on what he began with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just because Abraham died, just because Isaac died, just because Jacob died, didn't mean God's plan was over. And so now it comes to Moses, and it looks like God's plan is over because they are in slavery, they're oppressed, they are not living a great life of God's promises. They are living a very difficult existence. And God is calling Moses to lead them out of Egypt out of slavery. But at first what we see is that Moses is afraid to look at God. And this message was dropped into my heart around 4 to 5 weeks ago. So it's been brewing. I'm drinking a cup of coffee here. And good coffee is brewed. Mine is just instant. But it tastes nice. Thanks, Anna, for setting up the table. Tastes good. Don't you wish you had your own cup? It tastes good. A good coffee, though, is brewed. And this message has been brewing in my heart for the last 4 to 5 weeks. And what has been brewing in me is this verse, which normally I read over quickly. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Moses has a natural reaction to God's fire and glory. He hides his face. He's attracted to God's fire. He sees God's fire in the distance and he's attracted to it and he says, "What is this?" And he goes over to see, what is this strange sight that the bushes are burning, but it's not consumed? And so he's attracted to God's fire, but he's also afraid to look at God. In other words, if we look at this more deeply, he's afraid of that intimacy with God. Because God is an all-consuming fire, Moses is frightened to gaze at him. If he does, he may assume he will be consumed. And I think this is the reaction for most people who are interested in God. We're attracted to the fire, and we want to be close to that fire. But at the same time, we're afraid of God. We're hiding from him. We're not open to that full intimacy with God. There is a fear there. We may even say, like Moses, hineni. And hineni is a word that means literally, behold me. Behold me. Hine is behold. Hine ni. Hineni is behold me. Usually translated as here I am. It's here I am. And Moses says to God, here I am. And even though he says it with his mouth, the whole next couple of chapters of Moses' call, he is wrestling with God. He's struggling with obeying God to take leadership and to allow God to send him to the Israelites to deliver God's people. He says, send someone else. Send someone else. This is too much for me. And he's looking at all of his inadequacies, all of the reasons why God should not send him. But he says, hineni. He says, behold me. He says, here I am. He presents himself to God, but still there is that tension. There is that wrestling in him. And all of us have that. If we're honest, all of us have that. The person who's like, yeah, I can serve God. I'll do whatever he says. And with the human gusto, that person ends up falling flat on their face. And I still remember one of my Bible school students a while back who said to me, "Oh, give me an opportunity to preach. I can preach in my sleep." And I was thinking, oh, you're going to have to go through a lot of the dealings of God to get to a point where you realize, yeah, if you can preach in your sleep, then it's better to go to sleep. But I can preach in my sleep. I still remember those words. There's also a healthy fear and trembling before God. What I am focusing on in this message is that unhealthy of being afraid of God. Because all throughout God's conversation with Moses, what is Yahweh trying to communicate to Moses? He's trying to get Moses to get his eyes off of himself and say, look at me. Because Moses is focused on his inadequacies, how he can't. And he's afraid to look at God. But if he would just look at God, he would see that that glory, that fire, that power, that immeasurable power and knowledge is for him. is behind him. It's not to bring Moses down. It's not to destroy Moses, but it's to be with Moses. And this is the thing, is our whole attitude about God, our whole perspective needs to shift. A lot of us are enduring God. We feel like we're afraid if I do something wrong, he is going to crush me. And of course, we don't want to do anything displeasing to him. But our shift must be that this God who is calling me, this God is in love with me. Is something that Anna focused on in the worship. This God is in love with me. By God's grace, I've been married to Anna for 26 years this week. So it's like I said before, 26th wedding anniversary. I'm still in love with Anna. I'm still passionately in love with Anna. I'm still passionately in love with that. And now sometimes we have our little quabbles and things, but they always come back to how much we love one another. And this is the thing with our God. Our God is in love with us. He wants us to be successful. Not successful as the world paints the picture, but successful in doing his will. Being victorious, being triumphant, carrying out his plans, carrying out his eternal promises. But there's a tension we see in us that was in Moses. We want God, but we're afraid of God. And God spends it takes a lifetime of the renewing of our mind that this God who is all powerful, all knowing, is for us. We may think with regards to God that, what if he turns my life upside down? Or what if he exposes my sin? Or what if my life, as I know it, turns to ashes at his eyes that are blazing fire? Within us, often with relation to God, is a deep sense of shame, fear, and unworthiness. Have you felt this before? Because it's something that Moses felt. A deep sense of shame, fear, and worthiness. And like Moses, we react to God's words with, who am I? Exodus 3:11, God is calling him. He's saying, I want you to deliver the Israelites. And Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Who am I? So one of my points this morning is stop being afraid of God. Stop being afraid of God. God is calling us to stop being afraid of him. And the reason Moses struggled and fought with responding to God's call, and even Moses says, ask someone else, send someone else. The reason why he's struggling with that is because he's afraid to look at God. And only if he would look at God, he would see something much better than what he was thinking. Much better than what he's thinking. Part of our sinful nature is that we think wrongly about God. We feel wrongly about God. And we see him as absent when he is near. So throughout the conversation with God at the burning bush, the Lord persuades Moses, or the Lord is attempting to persuade Moses to look beyond himself, to focus on Yahweh, because Yahweh is the one who is, and he is the one who makes things happen. And to take it further, he is the one who's passionately in love with Moses and his people. He loves them. he's not doing this, oh, I gotta save my people because I promised them a whole hundreds of years ago. I promised them through Abraham, so I gotta save them. Oh. That's not the attitude God has. God is delighting in saving his people. And like I was saying before, Moses makes excuses about his inabilities, about his inadequacies. Listen to some of the excuses here, Exodus 6:10 through 12. Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." Now, I just want to stop here. Stephen gives an account, in the book of Acts, Stephen gives an account of Moses, and when he gives an account of Moses for the first 40 years of his life, he was educated in the palace of Egypt. He had the best education the world could afford, and it says he was powerful in word and speech. And part of the reason why we have the Bible written in Hebrew is because the first 5 books, Moses was a very educated man. He may have spent 40 years studying, so this is like a doctor of doctors. But then, he tries to deliver God's people in his own flesh by murdering an Egyptian. He has to flee, and he flees to the wilderness, and he spends 40 years shepherding sheep. And it seems like the trauma of that affected his own speech and his own thought about himself. So at first he probably thought, hey, I'm someone special. But then he's in the wilderness with the sheep, looking after his father-in-law's sheep for 40 years. And this breaks him down so that he's saying that he's slow to speech. And some people say that he was stuttering. He was stuttering. He was so broken. He was so traumatized. And he's looking at himself. I've never been eloquent, he says. That doesn't necessarily mean he was never eloquent. It seems like he was, but through that dealing and the process, the dealings he went through and the process he went through, he was broken down. I'm slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? Now go, I will help you speak and teach you what to say." So that's Exodus 4:10 through 12. And right after, he's not listening to God here. He says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." So he's not listening. And this is the thing I feel with the church, and I feel we're not listening. God is speaking, and we're hearing on one level that is naturally, but we're not really listening. We're not saying, "Oh yeah, I trust in what you say. I trust that you have made my mouth. I trust that you open my ears. I trust that you give sight to the blind. I trust that you will make it happen." And so we're hearing, but we're not hearing. And God is wanting us to hear. Do you think I could be married to my wife for 26 years doing everything we do if I didn't listen to my wife? We listen to one another. Sometimes I say, "Oh, I can't. What'd you say?" Calling out to each other from the other room. "I can't hear you." But we listen to one another. And that is the key for intimacy, is you listen. You listen to one another. Moses is focusing on his inadequacies, and because he's focusing on himself and his inadequacies and his own inabilities, he is not hearing. He is not hearing. Yahweh gets angry at Moses. He's not angry at Moses because of any great sin like adultery or stealing or murdering. Why does God get angry? In the next verse we have, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses. He's still, even though he was angry, he still made a way through his brother. "Your brother will help you." And this is the thing, even if God is angry, with you. He's still trying to work out a way for you to fulfill his plan. It's not like God's anger is like, in this kind of instance, it's like, I'm going to just burn you up. No, I'm going to still use you. But Moses, I have something much more for you. But the thing is, Yahweh's anger here is not for a great sin that we would, that's in our eyes and the eyes of humanity, we would say, that's a great sin. The issue is that he's angry because he's focusing on himself and his own abilities, and he's not hearing God's voice and God's heart. He fails to see the glory of God and consequently makes himself and his inabilities an idol. Moses is afraid to look at God, and because he's terrified, he's not listening. And I want to talk about fear for a little bit. When the Bible is telling us do not fear, it doesn't mean you're not going to feel fear. It's not saying, well, just don't feel fear or just don't. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to hear a voice of fear. When it's saying do not fear, it's saying for you to not give in to that feeling, not to give in to that voice. But we're all going to have the feeling of fear. We're all going to be afraid, but it's giving into it. That's what do not fear means. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have that emotion. You are going to have that emotion. But it's not giving into the fear. And I like that Ben McConaughey shared this in his talk with us at Bible school last semester. Well, fear has a way of hijacking your brain. You know, it's in Tabo works in the airline industry. Have you had anybody try to hijack a plane? That's good. That's good. That would make a stressful day, right? Someone hijacking a plane. It's going to take the plane somewhere else where it's not meant to go. And that is what fear tries to do. It tries to hijack the plane of your life. Take it someplace where it's not meant to go and threaten that everybody's going to die if you don't listen to it. And fear tries to hijack your brain. When you listen to fear, you stop reasoning rationally. You stop reasoning rationally and make every excuse not to do what God says. And that's why Moses is making every excuse. God hates fear because it keeps us from listening. It keeps us from listening to and enjoying intimacy with Him. When the Bible talks about the fear of God, because the Bible does talk about the fear of God, it is not meaning this cringing, crippling fear that causes you to cover your eyes and ears and, I can't hear you, God. It's not meaning that. Instead, it means a reverence, an awe, and a wonder of God that moves you to love Him and respect Him, a deep respect for Him. Moses' character undergoes dramatic development as we read Exodus. So as we continue to read Exodus, Moses' character goes under this dramatic development. The same man who was afraid to look at God in his initial encounter with Yahweh later prays two tremendous prayers. What are these two tremendous prayers? Well, the first, unless your presence goes with us, do not send us up from here. Exodus 33:15. Exodus 33:15. I'm just turning over there. Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. The prayer is more profound when you read it in light of Moses being afraid to look at God, and when you understand that the word presence in Hebrew is the same word as face, paneh. Sometimes it's written panim. In Hebrew, it's the plural panim, because the idea of the face is multifaceted. So what Moses is praying is, unless your face goes with us, Do not send us up from here. Now think about the face. What is Moses praying? At the time of Israel's greatest sin, making the golden calf, Moses wants God's eyes. He wants God's ears. He wants God's mouth, nose, and personality to go with him. Now he wants God's face. He wants God to behold him. He wants to behold God also, as we're going to see. He desires Yahweh's face, the most intimate aspect of God, his face. To seek his face is to seek intimacy with God. And so now he wants his face. He's grown past the part of not looking at God. I can't look at you. And now he wants, I want your face to go with us on this journey. I don't want just an angel. I don't want just a guardian. I want you, God, and I want your face. I want your presence. And he's not hiding from God's eyes anymore like the CEO and human resource manager were hiding from the camera at the Coldplay concert. You know, this camera comes on, this CEO from this company. I won't mention the company. I don't want anybody suing me. He's on a rampage. He's suing. And this camera comes up and he's married, he's got kids, and he's not and he's on the camera, but this is not his wife. The head of the human resource department. They're the ones that are meant to keep everybody in line, all right? And he's having an affair. And here it's on the Jumbotron of the Coldplay concert. And what was their reaction? It wasn't just smiling. Once they realize that eyes are on them, they're ducking out of the way. On the kiss cam, now everybody's joking with the kiss cam. The kiss cam comes up and the couples are hiding. It's a new fad, right? A new meme. That's because there's shame. They're hiding. But this is the opposite of Moses is now saying, I want your face. I want your eyes. I want you to go with us and see us. I don't want to hide from you any longer. So this character development in Moses, throughout Moses' history with God, he has come to realize that God is with him and for him. With him and for him. With regards to God's will, Yahweh only has good intentions toward Moses. And Moses wants more. Unless your presence goes with us, don't send us. It's God's presence that makes the difference in our church, in your life, in any community. Because we know, we go on to read here, how will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? It's going to be your presence. I added in that part at the end. It's going to be your presence. So it's God's presence that makes the difference. And with this prayer, Moses hits the target of God's heart for his people. We are people of his presence. We are people of God's presence. And this should always be the longing of our heart. Oh, your presence to be with us. If Moses can go from timidity to intimacy, you can grow in overcoming fear as well. So if Moses goes from timidity to intimacy, you can grow in overcoming fear. Now, after this, that's our first prayer. After this prayer, there is another prayer that Moses prays, and this prayer is a far cry from hiding in fear of God. He prays Exodus 33:18. Do you know this prayer? Show me your glory. Show me your glory. This is the fullness of who God is. All of his attributes, all of his power, all of his beauty, all of them. So he goes from hiding his face from God because he's afraid to look, to show me your glory. And it's a confidence that came from God himself. Now, after all that God has taught Moses on his journey, Moses longs to see with his eyes God's glory. And here we're talking about the eyes of the heart. In my last message, I talked about, when we're talking about looking at God, we're talking about the eyes of our heart. Moses wants to behold God in all the aspects of who he is. He stops hiding and completely surrenders to the fire of God's glory. And we learn in the New Testament that it's this vision of God that he has in his heart that enabled Moses to persevere through the wilderness and Israel's fickleness. Because we read in Hebrews 11:27, by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. That's the first part. The second part I want us to focus on. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Can I say that one more time? He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Ultimately from this prayer, show me your glory, Moses receives the most significant revelation of God's glory and goodness in Scripture. And this is the foundational revelation that is fulfilled in Jesus' flesh and blood, especially in the cross. And here's my translation of it, which I mentioned, which I shared, I think it was about a month and a half ago or so. Yahweh passed before Moses' face, making himself known by proclaiming, Yahweh, Yahweh God, deeply loving and helpful, patiently breathing deep when we stray, abundantly kind, loyal, and true. With love, he watches over the multitude. He forgives, lifting off our burden of guilt, wrongdoing, and path straying. Yet he does not allow injustice, letting the guilty go free. All are accountable to him. He sees fathers straying, so he seeks to save their children and their children's children to the third and fourth generations. That's Exodus 34:6-7. And I have a different take on the end part in translating it. So I shared about that in that Justice of God message that if you're interested in hearing more. Now we're coming near to the end. Moses unveils his face to God so that he can see him who is invisible. And you're also invited to uncover the eyes of your heart and behold God, to gaze on the beauty and goodness of who the Lord is. And we can hear our Lord's call in the bridegroom's voice of the Song of Songs. Now listen to this Song of Songs 2:14. In the Hebrew manuscripts, this part is highlighted by two letters that bookend it. Samech. And here's what it says, my dove. And this is the bridegroom's voice to the bride. And I want you to hear the Lord's voice to you through this. My dove in the clefts of the rock, in the hiding places on the mountainside, show me your face. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. This is our bridegroom's heart toward us. Show me your face. Don't hide it from me. Show me your face. Let me hear your voice. Your voice is sweet. Your face is lovely. Now, when people read the Song of Songs and they're not reading it critically, they often think that that's the bride's words to the bridegroom, but it's actually the bridegroom's words to the bride. God has always made a way for us to see him and reciprocally for him to see us. So that's the message of Scripture. You're not worthy to see because of your sin, and yet despite your sin, God says, look at me because you are worth it to me. I've created you and I've made a way so that you can wash your eyes. You can be clothed from your shame so that you can look into my eyes. See, the Lord wants us to look into his eyes. See, looking into someone's eyes is an intimate thing, especially between a husband and wife. Looking into someone's eyes is something. Coming from New York, you don't look into somebody's eyes, right? You keep your head down. That's what you're taught. That's when I came first to Australia. I had to learn a bit of a different way, and God had to teach me. Got to look up and look around. But why don't you look into somebody's eyes when you're on the subway in New York? Because someone will say, "Are you looking at me? You looking at me? You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me?" So you don't want to get in a fight, right? And so because you don't want to get in a fight, you keep to yourself. And so that's some wisdom if you're on New York. One of the funny incidences was when we were on the train with Anna's Australian friends, and I believe it was Catherine. Was it Catherine who turned to somebody on the train, on the subway, and said, "How are you going today?" And they were. This is before 9/11. Things changed in New York a bit after 9/11. There's a difference now. People are more open to talk to one another. Back then, you didn't talk to anybody. You kept your head down, and they were shocked. How am I doing today? Nobody talks to you. You're all crammed in a train, but you don't talk to one another. You don't look in one another's eyes. It's all these people, but keep to yourself. I found that after 9/11, people started to talk to one another. When I would go back and visit, I noticed something's different here. People are talking to one another. They're not as closed. But when Catherine said that as an Australian, just making conversation, it really shocked the New Yorker. This is what the Bible should also do to us. And what I'm saying, it should be a shock to us. Hey, God actually wants a friendship with us. An intimate friendship with us. It's not like you do my bidding and I'm at a distance, and God forbid that you would want to know me closely. That's too much for you. That's not the way of the Lord. The Lord's ultimate desire is for us to have a face-to-face relationship with him. And it's this phrase in Hebrew, Penim-el-Panim. Penim-el-Panim, face to face. And it's speaking of intimacy. Jesus looks into your eyes, and you look into Jesus' eyes. Mutual affection and love for one another, intimacy. And that phrase, Penim-el-Panim, stood out. It stood out to our Holy Fire school students during our Warriors Unit. I didn't realize it stood out until they started to share their exegesis assignments with the class. And a few of them said, the phrase that I mentioned, Penim-el-Panim, stood out to them. And I was happy because this is the type of relationship that God longs for. And just a quick commercial. Our Bible school is starting up in a week. So holyfireschool.com, and you can study. And we do have online, so you could do it online, but it would be great if you could come to class, be there present, so we can look each other in the eye. Listen again to the Song of Songs. In these verses, we hear hine, this word behold, used twice. And so now this is Song of Songs, chapter 2. The bridegroom says, "Behold, you're beautiful, my delight. Behold, how beautiful your eyes, doves." And then the bride responds, "Behold, you're beautiful, my beloved, so pleasant, how luxurious our bed." Now, in the modern translations, they often do not translate the word behold, but I like that word behold. It's actually Song of Songs chapter 1, not chapter 2. Chapter 1, verse 15 and verse 16. Chapter 1, verse 15 and 16. I like that word behold, which is often untranslated. This word hine. Behold, you're beautiful. Both say it to one another. The bridegroom to the bride and the bride to the bridegroom. Behold, you're beautiful. Notice it's two-way. The bridegroom gazing at the bride and the bride gazing back at the bridegroom. Both see the beauty in one another. Initially, when Yahweh calls Moses, the gaze is one way. Yahweh sees the beauty in Moses, but Moses doesn't see the beauty in Yahweh or in himself. But Yahweh beholds Moses, chooses him out of the crowd, calls him on this adventure. But Moses is resisting. He's hiding his face. However, as Moses develops, and this is my last major point, as Moses develops, he speaks to Yahweh face to face. And we read in Exodus 33:11a, Yahweh would speak to Moses face to face. Say that with me, face to face. Thanks, Anna. Face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Yahweh would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. So when you realize how much God enjoys you, you'll have the courage to remove your masks and enjoy Him. And when you're convinced He sees you as beautiful, a lot of people want to hear that they're beautiful. Well, to hear that from God is the ultimate. You're beautiful. I want you to hear that from God. That God's in love with you, to know that expels fear from your heart concerning God and punishment. As we know, His perfect love casts out fear. And furthermore, when you look at Him, when you see Him, something magnificent happens when you behold His beauty. And we'll talk about that next week. What magnificent thing happens in you when you behold His beauty. So we'll have to continue next week. I thought this was going to be my last one in this series, but no, it's going on. So we'll pray. Father, here we are. We love to break open your word and to see that you want intimacy with us. You want that face-to-face relationship. I'm praying for each one of us, from the youngest that's here, to the teenagers, to the older ones, to the ones at home and online, that we would have this Penim-el-Panim relationship with you, face-to-face. Intimacy, that we would know how much you are passionately in love with us. And if we are in any way thinking otherwise, we would behold the cross, because the cross is speaking loud and clear. I love you so much, I'm willing to die for you and take all of your sin, all the guilt for your sin on myself. So Jesus, thank you for the cross. Thank you for the blood. Thank you that you see us as beautiful. Take away our fear through your perfect love. In Jesus' name, amen.